news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, April 28th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 11 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 10. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. As hospitalizations continue surging across Ontario, in Ottawa, an ICU nurse is giving an inside look on the reality of working in a hospital at this stage of the pandemic. Alicia Robblee is a registered nurse at the Ottawa Civic intensive care unit. She says the hospital's ICU is unlike anything she has seen in over 9 years working there. It's currently above normal capacity.
Instead of taking care of one critically ill patient, we're now taking care of two, which that could soon be stretched to even more. And the admissions just keep coming, so there just is no sign of this slowing down right now for us in the ICU.
Now, she adds, quite often COVID patients require a lot of attention, and the age of patients being admitted is far lower than the start of the pandemic. She says many of those patients also had a relatively clean bill of health prior. Robley feels the initial vaccine rollout showed a glimmer of hope, so the third wave is more difficult as it seemed preventable. You can hear the full interview with this ICU nurse at 9:15. Coming up on the Rob Snow Show. We know we are not alone in the city or the province. Others are struggling through this wave 3 as well. For example, Nova Scotia entering a province-wide shutdown this morning after reporting a record number of COVID cases for now a third straight day. All schools there, all non-essential indoor services are closed for the next 2 weeks. 60 Canadian Forces members from the Navy and the Army based in Nova Scotia are being deployed to assist at COVID-19 testing centres. In Alberta, the Chief Medical Officer of Health says, simply put, the province is still headed in the wrong direction. Alberta has recorded more than 1,000 new cases of COVID-19 every day for weeks. Hospitalization rates are approaching peak levels of the second wave of this pandemic. City News Time at 9:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
You may still have a few showers around right now, but we get back into the steadier light rain for the afternoon. The high today 16 degrees. Tonight light rain and 7, and tomorrow showers at times through the day, rain for the evening and up to 19. For today the high 16.
And right now in Ottawa, 11 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 10. 10 employees at a metro in Orleans have tested positive for COVID, and this is just in the past 2 weeks. The most recent employees of the metro, located at 6509 Jeanne d'Arc east of Orleans Boulevard, informed the company of their positive tests back on Sunday. Their last days worked, respectively, April 23rd and 25th. Shoppers asked to monitor themselves for symptoms, self-isolate, and get tested for COVID if symptoms develop. Ontario's Auditor General releasing a report today on the province's COVID-19 ravaged nursing homes. The special report by Bonnie Lysyk scheduled to be tabled in the legislature around mid-morning today. Lysyk will then speak to those findings and also answer questions. At one point, the military, you remember, had to go in and help the worst hit nursing homes. In all, 3,756 residents have died, as have 11 staff. COVID-19 death toll in India has topped 200,000 today. The health ministry says nearly 3,300 more deaths has brought India's total to just over 200,000. New York Times South Asia Bureau Chief Jeffrey Gentleman says people in New Delhi are scared.
There are more people getting sick and more people dying in India right now than anywhere else. The official figures are probably just a small fraction of what's really happening.
Patients are suffocating because hospital oxygen supplies have run out. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's got the news and the views.
He's got views on the news.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Let's just launch right into it. Wednesday, big news day. A lot of material to cover over the next 3 hours. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News. Coming up in just a few minutes from now, an inside look at an Ottawa Hospital ICU. This morning, I had the great honor of speaking with an ICU nurse, a registered nurse working at the Civic campus of the Ottawa Hospital. Her name is Alicia Robblee. And she took me right there. And she really paints the picture of what it is like for her, for all of our healthcare workers that are on the front lines of this pandemic, now well into its third wave. And I mean, it's not slowing down for them. It's encouraging to see these case counts fall, but it's not slowing down at the Civic. The pressure in ICU is not being relieved. They're as busy as they've ever been. More than a year into this now, they're as busy as ever. And if anything, there are more patients on the way, with patient transfers happening on a daily basis coming in from the GTA. It's a lengthy interview. Covered a lot of territory. So actually, my opening remarks this morning will be abbreviated, because I'd rather you hear about the current situation from someone living it, someone in the epicenter, like Alicia Robblee. So my conversation with her coming up just a few minutes from now. Also on the show today, you've heard it said, everything is political. Everything is political. And that's as true now as it's ever been, especially when it comes to the relationship between Liberals in Ottawa and, say, Ford Nation conservatives in Toronto, down at Queen's Park. And the big political football these days is paid sick days. Paid sick days is sinking the good ship Ford. The whole business of paid sick days. And maybe some of you think, well, it should. It should. The premier refused to budge on this, okay, for months. For months. And he tried to get his point across. Didn't do a very good job, but he tried to get his point across about the sickness benefit at the federal level. And, he made some valid points in highlighting the shortcomings of the federal paid sick day program. Ford's points are many of the same points raised by Premier Horgan now in British Columbia, as Premier Horgan sets about coming up with that province's paid sick day program. But as well, let's face it, Ford has, he's been given it too. Ford's been pounding away at the Trudeau government over vaccine shipments and an unreliable supply of vaccines. He's been hammering the Trudeau government over the situation at the airports with international travel and the rapid spread of the variants. Only saw some action from Trudeau on that until Premier Legault spoke up about it, as a matter of fact. But it really hasn't hurt Trudeau. It's really hurt Doug Ford. The good ship Ford taking on water. And I think it's pretty obvious that nobody in Trudeau land is in any great rush to throw Premier Ford a political life preserver. Remember the good old days? Ford and Chrystia Freeland, the late night chats on the telephone, peer support. Yeah, those days are over. And I speculate because, well, there's an election coming, okay? The Trudeau Liberals want to have an election sooner rather than later. And during the last election, if you think back to 2009, who was the bad guy? Who was the bad guy? Who did Justin Trudeau mention in every campaign speech? Doug Ford. Doug Ford, Doug Ford, Doug Ford, Doug Ford. He mentioned Doug Ford like he was campaigning against Doug Ford. He barely mentioned Andrew Scheer. The boogeyman was Doug Ford. Doug Ford is the perfect bad guy. Doug Ford is the perfect enemy for a Trudeau Liberal. And it worked like a charm during the last federal election campaign. So look at all the problems Ford's having now. Why would Justin Trudeau help Doug Ford in Ontario? Why? Oh, you think he cares about working people and that's why he should do something? This is about power. And a beaten up, battered Doug Ford, that's perfect for the Trudeau Liberals in vote-rich Ontario. Desperate to call an election and win a coveted majority government. Let's not be naive here, okay? We're all in this together. Give your head a shake. We're going to score our political fix this morning with the help of Jason Lietaer from Enterprise, Susan Smith from Bluesky coming right up after the 9:30 news. City Council meeting this morning, Airbnb short-term rental platform in the crosshairs of the lefties. My, how time flies. I was thinking this morning, David, it's amazing the changes that can happen over just a few years. I was thinking back to Canada 150, Canada Day, La Machine, what a great time that was. July 2017. And how the rush was on, the gold rush, the Airbnb gold rush. I'll list my place on Airbnb and I'm going to make a mint. And that was kind of the coming out party for Airbnb in the capital city, Canada 150. And maybe to some degree, short-term rentals, Airbnb, maybe a victim of its own success. Maybe the platform could have done a better job policing some of its own listings. I think it's actually made a lot of progress on that front, but it doesn't matter now. The council is going to vote this morning and pass strict new rules about what kind of properties can be listed on that platform and what qualifies as a short-term rental. We'll be listening into the council meeting. 10 o'clock, our friends at Rogers Television leave the Rob Snow Show, bring you the city council meeting as they usually do, and then we'll get the play-by-play from Sue Schering, who writes about City Hall for her weekly column in the Ottawa Sun. So, during the talkback hour as well this morning, every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock, hottest hour of talk radio in town, we're going to get into the vaccine scavenger hunt. This kind of took off like a rocket yesterday. The lengths some people are willing to go to get a first shot of vaccine. I on the talkback hour this morning, just want to pick up right where we left off on that topic at 750-1310 on the Rob Snow Show here on City News.
Part of the reason I got back into this is because I am creative, and I also wanted to kind of have a fun flair, 50s vibe. All of the boxes are kind of fun names, the colors are fun, the logo is fun, and it's not just the package that I want to bring joy to people's lives, it's also the feeling that they get when they receive it, to know that there's someone that thinks of them and they're missing them and showing that they care when they can't be there. The smallest of the subscription boxes is the red box, the classical box. So you would get 5 to 7 items from the variety of categories. Those do change quarterly. However, with items that are more popular, we'll bring them back as people ask for them, or you could get them as an add-on option. And then those items will be included in the Jazzy box, the same items from the first, although they'll be in a larger size, more quantity, as well as a couple extra items. And then in the largest box, the Doo-Wop Deluxe, which is our most popular, that is a comprehensive offering of all of the other 2 boxes, plus additional. So for example, if you were to get a certain item in the smallest of the boxes, that item would still be offered in the large, but in a bigger size. So you're getting everything bigger, plus an extra few items. The first thing is I look for Canadian suppliers and manufacturers. That is something I'm very proud of. I make sure that the products are safe, that they fit into the packages that we offer, obviously. They have to be the proper size and weight. I have approximately 300 items that we have so far that we can order that basically help make people's lives easier. There's snacks, there's self-care items, there's entertainment, a little bit of everything. And basically I try it and test it, and if it's duly approved, then I include it in our packages. So some of the categories that we have is we offer treats, which is, of course, everyone likes treats, no matter how old you are. So we have things like nuts, chocolates, different types of snacks, maybe a handmade piece of jewelry. We also include pieces of jewelry as well, occasionally. We also have our pamper items. So your pamper items would include things like your bath soaks, your specialty lotions, things like that. Two other categories we offer are leisure. Leisure would include things such as puzzles, adult coloring books, paint by numbers, crosswords, word find, Sudoku, if that's how you say it. And we also have items for self-care and health. So masks, sanitizers, sanitizing wipes. They're all natural, non-drying, made with natural ingredients. So they're very good for everyone, especially in this time that we're dealing with.
The opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns.
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
And 1310 AM.
According to Ottawa Public Health this morning, 119 patients are in Ottawa area hospitals because of COVID-19, and 31 of them are in ICUs across the city, where medical staff are caring for the sickest of the sick. Alicia Robblee joins me. She's a registered nurse working at the Civic campus of the Ottawa Hospital in the ICU. And good morning. Thanks for joining me.
Good morning.
Yeah, it's really
Hi,
nice
thanks for having me.
Really nice to hear from you. Thank you so much for the time. What is your work day like these days? What is it like to work in an Ottawa ICU right now?
It's certainly unlike any days I've had before. I've been in the ICU at the Civic campus for 9 years now, and even on our busiest days before, it really didn't compare to what we're experiencing now. We have so many patients in the ICU, so we are above what our normal capacity would be for sure. And instead of taking care of one critically ill patient, we're now taking care of two, which that could soon be stretched to even more. And the admissions just keep coming, so there just is no sign of this slowing down right now for us in the ICU.
And it's important to keep in mind that, well, I use this number, 31 are in ICU, but there are other patients in ICU with other conditions, right, that you have to take care of as well. It's not all COVID all the time, right, as I understand?
No.
So, yeah.
And, what's also interesting about that number, I had recently read that Ottawa Public Health is only counting Ottawa residents with COVID in that number. So I think you said something in the 30s there.
Yeah, 31.
So that is inaccurate. In my ICU at the Civic campus alone, the last time that I worked, we had 16 COVID patients, and we are one of 4 ICUs in this city. And so as I understand it, the patients that are being transferred into our ICUs from out of town and other areas aren't even being counted in those numbers. So I know that the number of COVID patients in ICUs in the city are much higher than that number. And then you're right, we also have just the patients that we take care of every day. So at the Civic where I work, we're the trauma center for the region. And so, people are in car accidents, people have strokes. We're also the neurology center. There's a lot of reasons why people need ICU care, and those patients are starting to be at risk of not having a bed when they need it.
So when you say taking care of, instead of taking care of one patient, you're taking care of 2, give us a sense of what it is like to take care of a patient with COVID-19. As a registered nurse in ICU, what's involved with that?
So it's quite labor intensive. COVID patients tend to be very sick. And so, of course, most of the time when they've come to ICU, it's because they need to be intubated. They need to have assistance with their breathing and put on the ventilator. And so they're usually ventilated, and oftentimes on a lot of different medications to support their blood pressure. So lots of IV medications, lots of very complex monitoring. And so they're very sick, and normally that would require sort of one-to-one care. And like I said, right now we're taking care of 2 patients who are very sick. The other complex thing about this, of course, is how much PPE it takes to take care of these patients. And so, every time I go in the room, I have to gear up with all my PPE. I try to do as many things as I can in the room at once, just to sort of conserve PPE and to be efficient with my time. But sometimes a pump will go off for no reason, and you've got to gear up with all that stuff just to go in to, silence an alarm or something. Oftentimes these patients end up needing to be proned, which is something that I've seen talked about in the news, and that's where we turn patients onto their stomachs to try to help them with their oxygenation. And, that procedure alone takes 6 people. To do that. And so, it's very labor intensive, and we're stretched very thin right now. We have help in the ICU right now, staff from around the hospital that have been redeployed into the ICU. And so when I'm doubled with 2 critically ill patients, I would have somebody there as sort of like my helper, which is really great, but it's also, it adds a whole other layer of complexity to the job, because this is somebody with no critical care experience. They're not familiar with the environment. They have no experience taking care of these kinds of patients. So as well as, doing my already difficult job, I'm also orienting and training these new people.
Right. Mm-hmm. And what kind of other medical professionals are part of, say, a team that you would work with on a daily basis? Who surrounds you in the ICU?
There's a lot of us. So in the ICU, there would be an attending physician, so sort of the head doctor for the unit, and then resident doctors as well. Then we have physiotherapists, dietitians, and then probably, the most important for the COVID patients are the respiratory therapists. So we have a large group of RTs in the ICU, and they've also bumped up their numbers, so there's even more of that now. And they're the ones that sort of take care of the ventilator, and it's a really complex job that they have, trying to optimize the patient's sort of lung function to get them through COVID. And if you could see the x-rays of these patients, it's horrendous what this virus does to people's lungs.
Younger and sicker, we keep hearing that in the news. Would you say you've been an ICU nurse for 9 years, you've been through this now more than a year. Would you say you're seeing the patient profile change now?
Absolutely. In the first wave, we had a lot. Most of our COVID patients were, 70s and 80s. Okay. Some in their 60s. And with that came, of course, a lot of comorbidities and just people who already have other health issues, and now they've got COVID. Now we're seeing much younger patients. So I've cared for patients in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And most of these people have no underlying medical conditions, or something really benign that is almost laughable that it's on their chart. It's not a serious condition. So yes, they're much younger and getting so sick just from this virus without other health problems. And that is really difficult for us because we see ourselves in these patients. They're the same age as me. They've got young families like I do. We're trying to console their partners and family on the phone, and it's really hard because a lot of the time we're not seeing good outcomes.
You mentioned your family.
Mm-hmm.
How does your life, your work life right now affect your home life, your family life?
It's certainly taking a toll. I have 2 little ones. They're 7 and 3, and my husband's been out of work for almost the whole year now during the pandemic. He's a chef and he's been laid off. So on the one hand, it's I'm fortunate that he's been at home to watch the kids, and that's kind of allowed me to focus on work without having to worry about that. But I'm not my best self right now, that's for sure. It's hard to leave work at work right now. COVID is everywhere. I'm trying to be more mindful of sort of trying to turn it off when I'm at home, but that's really, really hard.
Yeah.
I often get messages from, my coworkers on my days off, just sort of letting me know what things are like in the unit. And it just continues to get worse. I'm back to work tomorrow for 2 days, and I'm already feeling that anxiety of, what am I walking into? What's my assignment going to be like? It's,
right.
It's hard to separate right now, and I'm certainly feeling, pretty burnt out at this point.
Yeah. And I would imagine that's probably commonplace for you and your coworkers, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can set just the mood and the morale in my unit right now. People are struggling. It's been a really long haul this past year, and I think that a lot of us, when the vaccine started to roll out and Ottawa had done so well up until this point, and so now to be facing this, it's really difficult, and also because I personally feel like this was probably preventable, this third wave, and so it's frustrating to be at this point right now, and also as great as it is that Ottawa's numbers seem to be trending down right now, that's not the only thing at play for us at work, because we continue to receive patients from out of town every shift. And so until there's a province-wide sort of shift in numbers and areas that are hardest hit like Toronto and Peel start to, see some relief in their hospitals, we're going to continue to get patients from those areas.
So what would be, say, a message then to people?
Yeah, I think that, I feel as though most people are doing the right thing right now. Mm-hmm. Most people are staying home and limiting their contacts. When we have patients come into the unit, it's very often, the entire families are sick. And so I think that people just need to be really careful with who they're seeing. It might seem pretty harmless just to see your parents or just to see your sister because you've been seeing them the whole time. But with these variants, it's proving to spread a lot easier between people. And so just really taking care of who you're seeing and limiting those contacts to just your household.
Yeah, because we don't want to see you, right, in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a patient recently who, again, her whole family was sick, and when we finally took the breathing tube out and woke her up, I had to tell her that she had COVID because she had no idea. And she was so shocked. She couldn't believe that she had COVID, and she couldn't understand how she got it. And so it's true. It really can happen to anybody right now.
Have you been vaccinated, both doses?
I have, yeah. So fortunately, most of the staff at the ICU were amongst the very first to be vaccinated, and we were vaccinated so early that it was before they had decided that the 4-month wait was okay. So most of us got our second dose, 3 weeks to a month after our first dose. But a lot of the people that are coming in to assist us, so the staff from other units, most of them have only had their first dose.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Alicia Robblee, it's been a great honor to speak with you this morning and get the inside look at what it is actually like there at the Civic these days in the ICU, on the front lines. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, and thank you to all of your colleagues and everything that they're going through right now. We really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you, Rob.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, April 28th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 13 degrees, and here's what's making news this hour. A local ICU nurse explaining the conditions they're working in, with hospitalizations from COVID stretching that system and putting incredible strain on the intensive care units, not only in the city, but right across the province. We'll have more on this story coming up at 10 o'clock. 10 workers at the Metro and Jeanne d'Arc have tested positive for COVID in the past couple of weeks. The most recent cases reported to the company from last Friday, a shift worked, and last Sunday. Now, if you are a shopper at that store and develop any COVID symptoms, again, the Metro on Jeanne d'Arc, you are encouraged to get a COVID-19 test. Ontario's Auditor General releasing a report very shortly into the COVID-19 outbreak that killed 3,756 residents of long-term care homes since last spring. 11 workers also lost their lives, and the situation got so bad at one point, the military had to be deployed to help in the worst hit of those homes. Canada Post says 80 of its employees ordered home from their massive facility in Mississauga due to an outbreak of COVID-19. The agency said Peel Public Health has directed the afternoon shift to self-isolate for 10 days. That could affect your mail delivery. City News Time, 9:33. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's time to score your political fix. Joining us this morning, Principal Bluesky Strategy Group, Susan Smith. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning, sir.
Any moment from now, we'll be joined by Jason Lietaer. He's the president of Enterprise Canada. You know how it is. He says cell phones and whatnot. Everything, live radio, it's always an adventure. So, look, let's just jump right into it, Susan.
Sure.
The Ford factor. So, Doug Ford entered the pandemic as premier, largely unpopular. Then his popularity increased because of his handling of the pandemic, and a lot of premiers experienced that effect. Now there's been this reversal of fortune. There's been the third wave. It's hit Ontario hard. He's getting hammered daily about the paid sick day issue. There's a little more than a year to go until the next provincial election in Ontario. What can Doug Ford do now to prevent, say, an election defeat next year?
Well, there's a lot I think he's going to have to do. He's going to have to let people know that he's listening, not to his political handlers, but to the medical and the science people. This is what's been happening. And I think what the change with Ford has been is he's moved away from his collaborative approach to more kind of a dogmatic and heavy-handed approach. He was bound a bit by ideology when he came in as premier, and that made him a little bit unpopular in some areas. He handled the pandemic well, as you said, because he abandoned ideology a little bit, and he was collaborative. They were working with the other premiers, they were working with the federal government, and he was seen to be, operating in the best interest of the province. Yeah. Now the latest round is, the closing of the playgrounds, the police state stuff. That's not, and the failing to implement the sick pay when that's been the obvious solution for people, and the vaccine rollout, not getting mobile vaccine distribution to some of these hotspots. That's what people will judge him on. He's got to change that in the next year. He's got to show that he's listening, and he's got to ask for help and accept the help when he needs it. I think there's a lot of politics that's been at play.
So who should he turn to for help then, do you think?
Well, I think the federal government, and this is where the politics comes into it, right?
Yeah.
The federal government has offered help. They've offered the military. They've offered other things. We've seen Nova Scotia take that up very, very quickly. And when I look at it from my perspective, just from a strategy perspective, I see Doug Ford, or maybe the people around Doug Ford, not wanting to accept help from Justin Trudeau's government when there could potentially be a federal election this year. And there's a bit of dogma in there and ideology in there, and that's not the right response at this point. So he's got to say, we need extra arms, legs, and bodies, and bring it in. And it's great that Newfoundland has stepped up, sending people to help, but I think Ontario needs more help than that. I think the military is probably where you get it from, not taking it from other provinces that are also hard hit. But again, I think he doesn't want to be seen to be taking assistance from the feds.
And he's been giving it as much as he gets it, right?
Well, he has, and he's targeted the feds. You know, he's a bit like a wounded animal that's back
on like vaccine supply, correct, on international travel. You know. Yeah,
correct. And I think that's lashing out, right? I mean, you watch the news conferences and he starts off in a normal tone, and all of a sudden you're like, where did that come from? Let's not forget he said he loved Chrystia Freeland earlier on, and he was super cooperative and collaborative. And the facts aren't bearing out. Some of the vaccine supply. We knew at the time when he was lashing out about that, there was 1 million shots that were still in freezers in Ontario. It was just a question of mobilizing and getting them out the door and into people's arms. So this is where I think people understand, this is where he's feeling the heat, is people understand that the feds are responsible for getting the vaccines to the provinces, but the provinces are responsible for getting them into the arms of their citizens, Ontarians in our case. And this is where the government's fallen down a bit. So he's lashing out. He's trying to deflect. He's trying to say, hey, look over here, instead of look at me and look at the problems here. Okay. But I don't think that will serve him well.
What do you think some of his strengths are as a politician? Some people kind of look at Doug Ford and that whole brand Ford through kind of a caricature lens, I think. Maybe ignoring the fact that it is a powerful brand. I mean, you don't become mayor of Toronto, you don't become premier of Ontario without having a fairly sophisticated machine. Okay, what you maybe lack in sophistication of ideas, or maybe you're not the best public speaker, what have you. You can't deny the success. I mean, you're talking about two pretty powerful public offices that this family's been able to secure.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the charm.
So what's the strength there that Doug Ford can kind of tap into?
Well, the strength is I actually think he is a good communicator when he's allowed just to be himself. He's terrible at reading off a teleprompter and speeches. Right. I don't know how he hasn't fixed his cadence in a speech. That's beyond me after being premier for this amount of time. I don't know. But he's not comfortable when he has to read a prepared text. But when he gets to speak about what he really feels, the blunt speaking, folksy, short sentences, short word Doug Ford appeals to people. They understand that. I get that.
It comes across as more authentic, maybe.
I think so. And I think he's, where he's been successful, he's been accessible and been able to pick up the phone and call people and get things done. The problem is running Ontario is a little bit more complicated than that. And this is where we've seen the problems with the vaccine rollout. And the people, through my networks of information that I've received, and these are not from political people, saying, the vaccine rollout behind the scenes has just been a disaster because there's actually, the organization is too flat and everything runs straight through the premier's office and the premier himself. And that's great when it's successful, but when you're having problems, you have to wear that as well. So I think there needs to be better delegation. There needs to be and this is where the Ford from his management style has to be able to do some more of that. He does appeal to people. His blunt speaking style works. He was cheery the other day. I do feel like he's a genuine guy, but at the same time, it has to be backed up by competence as well from an execution perspective. The other thing that's going to come out and people are going to be reminded about again is all the long-term care. There's stories about ATIP information that's coming out, the commission or the inquiry that's been looking into long-term care. That's
going to be a big story for the rest of the week.
Terrible.
Yeah.
I think it'll be longer than the week, Rob.
Yeah.
It's devastating. We have so many deaths in long-term care. The premier himself said, I'm going to put an iron ring around this and protect them. And it didn't happen. And I think the buck will stop with him there. It has to.
Okay. But if you're the Trudeau Liberals and you're getting ready for your own election, okay? Whether that's going to happen in weeks or months, whatever. There's probably going to be an election this year. You think there was going to be an election this year?
In months,
right?
though, not weeks.
Months, yeah, months.
Yeah, not anytime.
I mean, if we all remember back to 2019 in that campaign, every stop that Justin Trudeau made in Ontario, he mentioned Doug Ford at way more times than he ever mentioned Andrew Scheer. It was public enemy number one was Doug Ford for the federal Liberals. I mean, my gosh, look out how bad Doug Ford is in Ontario. You don't want them running the country, do you? So, if you're Doug Ford, or pardon me, if you're Justin Trudeau, there's no benefit for you in like throwing Doug Ford any kind of lifeline, is there?
No, I don't think so. But the past federal campaign goes exactly to your point. What you opened with, you said at the beginning, Ford was unpopular. So Trudeau played on that in the 2019 campaign.
Right.
To me, I think Trudeau will only go after Ford if Ford causes him to do so. The federal government has taken the high road in terms of working with the provinces from a collaborative perspective. Ford's been taking shots at the feds, and the Prime Minister stayed out of it, and he stayed above the fray a bit. If Ford continues along that path, he's creating an opening or almost a requirement for the federal government and potentially the Prime Minister to respond. But if Ford, reins himself in a little bit and focuses more on what he needs to do rather than pointing fingers of blame to try and deflect it, he'll probably prevent himself from being a focal point in the federal campaign. And Doug Ford doesn't need to be. It's not beneficial for Ford to be the focal point in the next federal campaign because it would be so close to his own provincial campaign. So he won't need that extra amount of negativity. They both are going to need to, they both will have to run on the competence in how their respective governments handled the pandemic crisis and how they're going to.
In a way, they both need each other. Ford needs Trudeau to be kind of the foil, right? To be kind of the anti-Ford.
Well, he'll try. Yeah. He'll try. And if he does that, then that gives Trudeau ample reason to go right back at him. But to me, at the present moment, it would be a big pivot for the federal Liberals to move to that. Now, if the tone, people get chippier the closer they get to an election. That's what happens.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I think, by the way, though, I do think Aaron O'Toole will provide plenty of fodder for Justin Trudeau in the next federal election. You're not going to need that much of Doug Ford. He'll be pretty good with O'Toole.
Okay. Well, that's a good place to stop because the polls have the Liberals riding high, not so much for the Conservatives. I mean, for the Conservatives, it's all they can do to crack 30% now, which is very worrisome if you cheer for the team in blue. So we'll stop here. It's part one concluded of the Political Fix. Part two coming up here on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Well, we're celebrating our 43rd year. It's still family operated. We're in our second generation. We pre-COVID, we're at about 1,000 employees. We have 20 stores from coast to coast in Canada. We do our own manufacturing. Right here in Ottawa, we have about 160 people that support Canadian-made manufacturing in addition to our retail stores. Taking you back to mid-March and the impact of the pandemic on Lee Valley. Lee Valley was actually in a tough spot. We had just launched our website a few months prior to that, and we were going through, a fairly typical deployment dive where your customers retract as they adjust to the website. And then under stress already, this pandemic hit. And in the early days, it was pretty critical. It hit us really hard. Stores were closed. We weren't sure what to do, so we had to go right into survival mode. As a result, we had to take our workforce almost back to half of where we were at because the stores were closed, and with 20 stores, that's a big retail workforce. But what we were able to do pretty quickly, with a little luck, being essential, selling tools and hardware, we were able to adjust our business model, with respect to the stores and our fulfillment operation, that new website that we were under stress worked out well for us, because as the world was under house arrest, people were looking to online, and the conversion to our online sales in some cases almost doubled. And we saw tremendous interest in things to do at home. Where we were lucky once again is, and fortunate, is at our product offering. You know, work at home tools, craft, hobbies, backyard, container gardening, you name it. What we sold was really appealing to people. With respect to our stores, Lee Valley, you know, a rare unknown fact was that we were one of the pioneers of curbside pickup. We've been doing it for 25 years. Pretty much dove right into the application to help with the contactless shopping right away. We took the application, and it's not like a Apple application where you have to download it to your phone and clutter up your phone. This is literally resides right on our website. So you walk into our store with your phone, you pull up our website, and there's a little scan icon. You just tap that, select your store, off you go. You go through the showroom, you scan product, you can read more about it, you can check the on hand, you can add it to your cart, continue to shop, and when you're ready, you just submit it to the counter. We'll go pick it for you. We'll call out your name, we'll check you out, send you on your way. You haven't touched anything. It's completely safe, and it's using a device you're comfortable with and a website that you're familiar with. Amazingly, 9 out of 10 people that used it loved it and want to use it again.
Opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Your political fix part 2. I should say our sister station in Halifax, Nova Scotia, News 95.7, scored an interview with Prime Minister Trudeau today. Aired in Halifax at 9 o'clock our time. The whole city of Halifax under lockdown. The whole province now under lockdown. The entire province of Nova Scotia under lockdown because COVID-19 is taken off. And I mean, you know, the Atlantic bubble, I mean, they don't mess around. So they wasted no time just shutting her all down for the next 2 weeks. They had 96 cases in Nova Scotia reported yesterday. I mean, 96 cases doesn't sound like a lot, but less than 1 million people live in Nova Scotia, like 970,000 people or something. So it's like having 1,500 cases in Ontario. I mean, we'd take that right about now. A daily report of 1,500 cases is a sign of great progress. But in Nova Scotia, you know the way the Atlantic bubble premiers operate. They don't wait for the numbers to go up. They just shut her all down, and that's what they're doing for the next 2 weeks. So we'll play some of that interview a little bit later, the Prime Minister on our sister station in Halifax this morning. This is part 2 of your political fix. Susan Smith is here from Bluesky, and Jason Lietaer's here from Enterprise Canada. And why don't we jump into these polling numbers? Good morning, Jason. Great to hear from you, by the way.
Yeah,
thank you.
Morning.
Yep. The latest polls suggest the Trudeau Liberals are anywhere between 6 to 11 points ahead of the Conservatives. Jason, why do you think the Liberals continue to lead commandingly in these polls, and the Conservatives are still struggling and to crack 30%? What do you think's going on now?
Yeah, they've got a really durable lead for sure. You know, the PM has mostly stayed out of the fray over the last little bit. I think it's been a smart political decision. You know, as you know, I mean, there's one guy taking heat for a lot of stuff in Canada these days, and it's Doug Ford, and the PM sort of just drafting in behind, hiding under his skirts, and doing okay in terms of that kind of stuff. Anything that goes bad is Doug Ford's fault. Anything that goes good is his responsibility. It's the sort of way, and listen, smart politically to sort of take a little lower profile over the last little bit. I mean, the things that he's done poorly, which are the border restrictions, which are, I think, have been devastating, or part of the devastation in Peel region and in Toronto, and the early vaccine procurement didn't go well. Vaccines are starting to roll out, so, you know, sort of people have short memories. So, long story short, I mean, number one, he hasn't been around much. Number two, the things are starting to improve. The things that he's mostly in charge of, and the border stuff, I think people aren't really buying it. And then it's really hard for Mr. O'Toole to punch through. He's a relatively new leader. Yeah. He had a couple of missteps early. I think he's sort of solidified those things, but it's really hard for him to punch through. So bottom line, that's a durable Liberal lead.
Durable Liberal lead. Susan Smith must bring a smile to your face.
As long as it holds on, Rob. As long as it holds on.
Well, it's durable. It's durable. Okay.
You don't want to peak too early.
Yep. What do you think about that analysis from Jason?
Yeah, you know what? Jason's right a little bit right now. Doug Ford is the cause of most people's discontent at the moment, certainly in Ontario, which is a big province and lots of voters. Jason Kenney also has a whole bunch of people who are unhappy with him in Alberta. Not that those votes would go Liberal, but I think some of that translates to Aaron O'Toole. Jason's also right. O'Toole has failed to punch through, or where he's gotten any kind of attention. He's had to, it's problems that have been, own goals, as you would call it, right? 54% of the party denying that climate change is real, voting against him at his convention that was supposed to be the big coming out party, then surprising his caucus and his party with a new carbon tax and a new carbon strategy that inflamed Western Canada, and has got Jay Hill and the Maverick Party saying they're going to go after the Conservatives, Aaron O'Toole's Conservatives out west, running against them in seats. And, putting forward for people like a Petrobucks account, the more you burn, the more you earn from a climate change solution. That's causing a few people, the moderates that they're trying to attract back, to scratch their heads. So I think Trudeau is benefiting from that. He's also benefiting from the fact that largely the vaccine rollout is going, or the vaccine procurement is going as they said it would. They told us there would be, X numbers millions by the end of March. The numbers were higher than that. They've told us that there will be X millions by the end of June. We're definitely on track for that. And they said that every Canadian who wanted a vaccine by the end of September would have one. And I think we're on track for that too, now that we've been able to get into the 40s.
Overcome the early struggles, you're saying.
I think so, definitely. And people, and he has not gotten into the messy partisanship. He's not, the PM's not throwing haymakers at people at this point in time. He's being prime ministerial, and he's doing his job. And there's movement on other files. There's been a budget. There's interactions with Joe Biden's administration and so on. So he's trying to put the country back on regular footing. It's going to take a long time to do that.
All right.
But he's doing it in a fairly competent way.
Let me move along here. Everybody remembers the Maclean's cover, The Resistance. Right? The Resistance. It's still a great looking picture. It's still a great looking picture. Whoever took that, it's Annie Leibovitz picture. So great. Scott Moe, Kenney, Scheer, Pallister, and Ford. Okay, now so Scheer's gone. It was the kind of picture that a teenage conservative would put that up in their bedroom. This is what's going to make you sleep well at night. At least these people are around for Canada. Okay, forget what's going on in Ottawa. We still have the Resistance. Okay. Scheer's gone. Who might be the next to go? I mean, could it be Jason Kenney? Doug Ford?
I think I don't know.
Go ahead, Jason. Go ahead, Jason.
I think Kenny's going to squeak through and get reelected. I actually think Ford's going to win the next election on Ontario.
Okay.
Pallister, it's funny. Pallister has one of those things where he wasn't very popular beforehand. He had a bunch of controversies about, him living in Costa Rica and all this kind of stuff. And, it's funny. He's the only guy that's in Canada, for some reason, the Prime Minister hasn't got a deal to vaccinate truckers on both sides of the border. Pallister with North Dakota is the only guy who's been able to figure that out in Canada. Mo's going to be there as long as he needs to be there, as long as he wants to be there. If I had to guess, I'd actually say Pallister, if you want a real answer.
Oh, really? Okay. Interesting. Is there still a such thing as the Resistance? Does it even kind of exist anymore?
I don't think so. Though I'd love Maclean's to run that cover again and say who dat, where'd they all go, or how's that going for you?
All right.
I think maybe the headline for that one. I think Jason Kenney's in a little more trouble than people think. We're not in Alberta, and we don't hear the daily diatribe against him. But surprisingly, he has not proven to be an adept leader of his government. He was going after Indigenous communities the other day. I heard him and I was like, holy cow, up in Fort Mac, basically saying that the vaccine, the flurry of COVID in Fort McMurray is partially due to Indigenous community vaccine resistance. I was like, holy man, you better give up that line pretty soon, Jason. Anyway, I think he's in a little bit of trouble. Pallister always chuckles. I noticed he had a white forehead and a tan face at his last news conference. I don't know, he's managed to sneak down to Costa Rica again. I think Scott Moe is fine. And I think Doug Ford will squeak it out simply because I'm not sure if the alternatives are there enough in a strong.
Fourth time might not be the charm for Andrea Horvath. Okay, and speaking of who's driving the minivan for the Ontario Liberals these days? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's no breakthrough. I don't think that's going to be a breakthrough. Yeah, it'll still be there may be there may be a pickup in seats. I think they likely will pick up some seats, but there'll be no big breakthrough.
Okay, let me ask you that we only have 2 minutes left, and there are borrowed 2 minutes. But Biden, 100 days. I think Joe Biden might be more progressive than Justin Trudeau. U.S. congressional speech tonight. Biden is going to announce $1.5 trillion for child care and post-secondary education. He's going to pay for it by sticking it to the rich. $2 trillion jobs and infrastructure plan going to be paid for by higher corporate taxes. And he vows to cut greenhouse gas emissions even more than Justin Trudeau.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV.